So we've been in a series called Living on Purpose, and we're just going to wrap that up today. And I wonder, as we think about that passage and the idea of living on purpose, living life with purpose is all about having a bit of a plan for what you're going to do with your life. Thinking of plans, I wonder if you've ever tried to put some IKEA furniture together without the plan. Ever tried that? It may end up looking a little bit like this. Certainly does if I give it a go putting together IKEA furniture without a plan. It's a bit of a mess. You start out, you think, oh, this will be easy. I don't need that. It's just a shelf. I can do that. But then halfway through, you're knee deep in random screws and wooden panels, and you're completely lost. And you're thinking, what on earth? Where's the hammer? Where's the duct tape? I'm going to fix this thing. And you pull out the plan. And life can feel a little bit like that sometimes, can't it? Where you're sort of halfway through. We're trying to pull things together, we're not consulting the instructions, and we're just guessing where things are supposed to fit. But we do have an instruction manual for life, don't we? And it's not just a list of steps to take, it's a grand story. It's a detailed story of the Master's grand plan for history. And here it is. This is the analogue version. You may have a digital version on your phone. But we have the instruction manual for life. We have that. And even more than that, imagine going through life having a personal relationship with the one who created it all and being able to consult him at any moment. That would be great if you were putting together IKEA furniture and the maker was right there. You could just ask, where does this bit go? And life is like that. We have the manual for life. We have access to the maker. And we can ask, where does this bit go, God? Where does this bit go? So imagine that, living like you can consult the one who drew up the plan for life. The one who sees the beginning from the end, as Isaiah says. The one who sees the beginning from the end and everything in between. The one whose plan always works out. The one who's never scrambling for a glue gun or duct tape or fencing wire to fix it. And that's where true confidence comes from, isn't it? Knowing the Maker and following his plan. That's where we can be confident about knowing that we're living life on purpose when we're following the Maker's plan. It's not about having all the answers. It's about knowing and trusting the one who has all the answers. And surely this is the Christian life, isn't it? This is what the Christian life is about. It's about knowing and being confident in the one who drew up the plan for life, who knows our purpose for life. And so as we think about this idea of living a life of intentionality, living a life on purpose, that's where I want us to go today, to consider the confidence we can have in life. Because if you're a Christian today, you do know the one who knows the way. And real confidence in life, it's not just about trusting yourself and your own abilities. It's about resting on God's unstoppable plan. And that's what we see here in Isaiah 46. And I want to turn our attention there just for a moment. I wonder what your life would look like if every day you lived it as if you believed God knew all the answers, because he does. Imagine if you lived like that, knowing that God knows all the answers to any question you might face that day, any challenge you might face that day. God knows the answer. Imagine if we lived every moment of every day like that. Our doubts would evaporate, wouldn't they? And our worries would disappear. You know, there's one critical reason why we can actually have that kind of unshakable confidence, and that is because God knows everything. God knows everything. He knows the beginning of the story, and he knows the end of the story, and he knows everything that's going to happen in between. And this truth is exactly what the Lord reveals to us in our reading today, in Isaiah 46. Verse 9 says, I am God, there is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning. He makes it known. He can make it known. He knows it and he can reveal it, the end from the beginning. He knows every part of your life intimately. He knows your story. He knows your past. He knows your present. He knows your future. And none of it is a surprise to him. It might have surprised you, but none of it is a surprise to the Lord. And he's not just aware of the big moments of your life. He's seen every single detail of your life. The psalmist famously put it like this in Psalm 139. He said, Lord, you have searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down. You know when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. He knows us intimately. God doesn't just see you. He knows you. He knows all about you. And so this means that we don't need to wander aimlessly through life. We're not left to figure it out for ourselves. The one who knows us fully already knows our life in its entirety, even those parts of it we haven't lived yet. He knows it all in its entirety. He knows the beginning and the end. And a couple of chapters earlier in Isaiah 44, Isaiah says this, God who made you has something to say to you. The God who formed you in the womb wants to help you. He wants to help you. He knows the beginning from the end, and he knows all the bits in between. And this God who formed you wants to help you. He's willing to help you take each step as you live out his purpose in your life. He formed you in the womb. He knows you intimately. And so our purpose in life begins with trusting that God knows us better than anyone. You are known. And this means you can step into life confidently, knowing that nothing that happens to you will be a surprise to God. And this is good news in a world where everything seems to be constantly shifting and changing. In a world where values change and circumstances change and fortunes change and people change. In that kind of environment, the fact that God knows everything gives us a solid foundation that we can actually stand on. God's perfect knowledge is the one thing we can fully trust. He's never guessing. He's never unsure. He's never at a loss as to what to do. Everything the Lord does has a purpose for us. And that purpose is always good. In Hebrews 4:13, it puts it this way. Nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. He knows everything. It's all laid bare. God sees it all. And if we ignore God, or if we're the kind of person to dismiss God, that could be a scary thought. He's seen your entire life. He knows everything. But of course, for those of us who love the Lord, this is a reassuring thought, isn't it? This is good news. It means that God is never out of the loop on anything in our lives. And the psalmist again tells us how valuable this is in Psalm 139. How valuable it is that God knows everything. He says, how precious to me are your thoughts, God. How precious to me is it that you know everything. How precious to me are your thoughts. God's thoughts, his wisdom, his knowledge are precious. They're valuable. And why? Not because his plans and thoughts and his knowledge is just vast. It is that. But his knowledge is personal as well. He knows about you. His knowledge is of you. His thoughts are about you, and his thoughts are for your good. God's plans for us are always good. His plans are never to harm us. And so when we trust God's complete knowledge about us and about our world, then that gives us the faith and the confidence to move forward. We can move forward even when we can't see the next step clearly, because the Lord does see it. And this is the kind of confidence that allows us to say, Lord, I don't know where all this is going. I don't know what's happening right now. It's chaos. It looks like it's out of control to me. But I trust you because I know you know it. And I know you know what you're doing. That's the kind of confidence that comes from knowing that God is in control of his purposes and his world and your future. Even when life feels uncertain, God is not uncertain. And that's very reassuring. And so here's the thing. While God has a grand plan for his creation, a big plan for his creation, he has a tailor-made place for you in it. For each of us, our individual purpose is a part of God's greater plan. Ephesians 2 says this, puts it this way: we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Think about that for a moment. God didn't just create you randomly. You're not an accident. He crafted you intentionally. You're his handiwork. You're made with a specific purpose in mind. God made you with a specific purpose in mind for some good works to do. And these good works were prepared for you to do even before you existed, prepared in advance. Your life's purpose isn't meant to stand alone. It's actually woven into God's grand story. What he's doing in you and through you is connected in some bigger way to his grand plan in the universe. And so you're not just chasing your own dreams. And the world will say that. Just chase your dreams. Chase your dreams. Where does that dream come from? The Lord places that dream in your heart because he's shaped you for a unique purpose to play in his grand plan, for works prepared for you to do in advance. God has a bigger plan. We're part of it. We're not just living for ourselves, we're living for his purposes. So let's lean into that. Let's trust that he knows exactly what he's doing, and he's doing it through us and the unique way he's shaped each one of us. And this is how we can live with confidence and purpose, because we trust that God knows us inside and out. We trust a God who gives our lives meaning. We trust a God who leads us perfectly. We trust a God who invites us into something that's bigger than ourselves. And we can be confident because God knows the beginning from the end. And that's what we learn in Isaiah 46 just here. We may not always know what's coming, but we can trust him because he does. So let me ask you another question. As we talk about being confidently moving forward into the Lord's purposes, I want to ask you, where does your confidence come from? And of course, we're good Christians, so we'd say our confidence comes from the Lord. But my challenge to us this morning is that that's a wonderful theological and a correct answer. But where does it really come from? Because we get our confidence from a number of different places, don't we? And because we're all human. So Christians are supposed to draw their confidence from the Lord, but sometimes we don't. So where does their confidence come from? Maybe your confidence comes from your job. Maybe you're really good at what you do. Maybe you're a leader in your field of expertise and you draw a lot of confidence from that because you're an expert in your particular area. Maybe that's where you get your confidence from. Maybe you get your confidence from your health. And I can say as a man, certainly until the age of 30, I thought I was invincible because I was never sick. What's going on? And most males under 30 think they're invincible. Maybe you get your confidence from your health or your fitness. Or maybe you get your confidence from having clear skin, a slim figure, and a dynamite wardrobe. You know, stepping out, dressed for success, and your confidence comes from there. Or maybe your confidence comes from your finances. Maybe you're sitting here today thinking, inflation? What's the problem? I'm breezing through right now because you're comfortable. Your finances are in order. And maybe you're thinking that's where you get your confidence from. But the truth is, of course, all of those things can change in an instant, can't they? In just an instant. But there's one foundation that never changes. And of course, that's the Lord. And in particular, his rule over all things never changes. God knows everything, and this gives us confidence. But God is also in control of all things, and this should be our source of confidence as well. Again, in Isaiah 46, God says this, "My purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please." When God says, "My purpose will stand," he's reminding us that his plans are unshakable, unlike our plans, which can be derailed. Our health can be derailed. Our finances can be derailed. Our lives can be derailed. Our plans can be derailed, but God's plans are unshakable. God's purposes stand firm through all of it. The Bible says the plans of the Lord stand firm forever. The purpose of his heart through all generations. That's Psalm 33. So think about that. Your life might be full of uncertainty, but God's plans are rock solid. They never change. Even when things don't go as we expected, the Lord's not surprised by that. And his purposes remain unchanged. And that's where our confidence should come from. We should be comforted by that, especially when life feels chaotic. Here's what it means for us. God's purposes never change. And because of that, shouldn't we align our lives with his purposes instead of trying to control everything ourselves? Now, I know it's tempting to try and rely on our own strength and our own understanding, but when we trust in God's rule over all things, we can let go of the need and the stress and the weight of having to control everything and take responsibility for everything. We can say, "God, I may not understand what's happening right now, but I trust that your purposes will stand." We can let go of having to control everything when we know and trust that the Lord rules over everything. A friend of mine owned a real estate business, and back in the global financial crisis, 2008, around there, so about 15 years ago, or thereabout, 16 years ago, his business, like most real estate businesses, just nosedived. It was a really stressful time, as it is now. It's a hard time for the real estate business, because when the economy is shaking, everyone just sits tight, don't they? They hold tight. No one sells their house. No one moves house. We'll just wait. Let's ride this out. Let's stay where we are. That's bad news for a real estate agent. And his business was at risk. He had 2 offices. He had to close one, lay off some staff, run a lean business. His family home was at risk. His entire life's work was at risk. And it was very, very stressful for him. And it was a dire situation. In fact, it was beginning to affect his health. And so one thing I admire about him is that he called me up and he said, he was a Christian man. He said, "I want to pray about this. I want to pray regularly about this. I am praying, but I want to pray together." And so we met together on a regular basis for about a year to pray together through that whole situation. It just impressed me that he turned to the Lord. Now, he had to take some sensible steps there with his business, but he was doing what he could to trust in the Lord. And so aligning our lives with God's purposes doesn't mean that everything's always going to go smoothly for us, but it does mean that we can live with confidence, knowing that his plans are unstoppable. So God's purpose doesn't change, and because of that, we'd be smart to align our lives with his purposes and his plan. And then Isaiah 46 says this, God will do whatever he pleases. He says, "My purpose will stand and I will do all that I please." That's a powerful statement. I'll do all that I please. There's not many of us here who could say, "I can do whatever I please." Because, we have to go to work to earn money and pay the bills, so you don't get to do what you please. We live in a land with law, and we have to live under the law, so we don't get really to do what we please. But here's the Lord saying, "I will do all that I please." That is a powerful statement. I'll do whatever I please. Even the King of England has to answer to Parliament. But here's the Lord God saying, I'll do whatever I please. It's a powerful statement. People make flawed decisions and other people get hurt. But God's decisions are based on what pleases him. He'll do whatever he pleases. And his decisions are based on what pleases him. And what pleases him is good. And that's good news, right? That what is good is what pleases the Lord. What pleases God? It pleases God to save people. It pleases God to keep his word and to keep his promises. It pleases God to restore lives, to restore circumstances and people and relationships, and restore all kinds of things. It pleases God to champion justice and mercy and truth and compassion. These are the things that please God. And this is why God's purposes are good, because God is pleased with goodness. And it's really helpful to know that, especially in those times when life looks like it's spinning out of control and what's happening to you is not good. When we're faced with what looks like some really bad circumstances and we're asking ourselves, why on earth has this happened? In those times, we've got to remember that the Lord does whatever he pleases. And the good news is what pleases the Lord is goodness, righteousness. It means that we can move forward in life with confidence because we know that God's in control of all things, so we don't have to be. And we can move forward with confidence in life because we know that God does whatever pleases him. And he's pleased with what is good. So we don't have to fear the future. We don't have to worry about the unknown. God's purposes never change, and that should give us confidence. And so there's a couple of things we've learnt from Isaiah 46 so far. First of all, God knows everything. So we don't have to. We don't have to have all the answers. God knows everything. And secondly, God's in control of everything, so we can let go of control. All that stress and anxiety you're holding on to is because you're trying to control your circumstances. We just need to hand it over to the Lord. Say, I don't know. Lord, this is up to you. Show me the way, and he will. That's where real confidence comes from in life. The next key thought that Isaiah brings up to us is this: God is actively involved in every minute detail of his plan. God's involved. He's not distant. It's not like he's set things in motion and then walked away. God's engaged in every detail of his plan. So Isaiah says this in Isaiah 46:11, "From the east I summon a bird of prey, from a far off land a man to fulfill my purpose. What I have said, that I will bring about. What I have planned, that I will do." So God's not distant and detached. He's actively involved. And what Isaiah is saying here is that God is moving creation, birds of prey, a man from the east. He's moving things around to fulfill his purposes. He can summon a bird or a person from a far off land to fulfill his purposes. Nothing is outside of his control. The Lord has power over nations, over creation, over people, and he can employ them in his plans however he pleases. God can use anyone, and he can use anything to accomplish his will. And so history is not just a series of random events, it's guided carefully by God's hand. Even when we can't see it, God is at work, intimately involved in his plan in the world. We can trust that God's at work behind the scenes, even when life feels chaotic. And so maybe you're going through a difficult season. You should be reassured by this, that God hasn't deserted you. He's right here in the midst of it, in the thick of it. He's intimately involved in your life, and he's at work behind the scenes. And so my challenge to us today is that we ought to align ourselves, when we see God at work, align ourselves with his purposes, to be confident that he's in control of every detail of our lives and the world. Our confidence doesn't come from the economy, doesn't come from politics, doesn't come from our health or our good looks or talent, or your good looks, not mine. It doesn't come from there. It comes from the Lord. Our confidence comes from God's unshakable purposes. And he's a good God. He's a loving God. He's in control, and we can trust him to work things out in our lives. And so as we wrap up this whole series and the sermon today, I just want to leave you with some practical ways to live this out in your lives this week. The way we can live out what we've learned here from Isaiah 46. I've got them on the screen. The first one is this: you don't need to have all the answers. God knows. God knows everything. And we can rest in his infinite knowledge. He knows the beginning from the end and what is still to come. So it's okay if you don't know exactly where your life is headed, or if you don't know exactly what's going on right now. It's okay. God sees the full picture. And Jesus has told us he is the way, the truth, and the life. We need to, in faith, follow the Lord. He's promised to show us the way ahead. And so this week I want to encourage you to spend some time in prayer, asking the Lord to give you peace in areas where you feel uncertain or worried or anxious. To hand control over to him, because he knows the answers. That's the first thing. You don't have to know everything, don't have to know all the answers, because God knows. The second is, stop trying to control everything. I know that's easier said than done, particularly when things are stressful. But the Lord's inviting us today to let go of the need to control the outcomes. And so this week, try to identify where you're struggling to let go and to make a decision right there and then to trust the Lord. Pray something like this: Lord, I don't know how this is going to work out, but I trust you, and I trust that your purposes will stand. And finally, keep your eyes open for where God is at work around you in your daily life. Because God's always at work. We're the ones who just can't see it. We need to take time to look. God's always at work. He's always working, even in the small, mundane moments of life. So take some time this week to pay attention to the people you're interacting with the situations that you find yourself in. And in that moment, ask the Lord quietly in your heart to help you see how he is working behind the scenes. And then be ready to step out in faith and to join him in whatever it is he's doing. Let's not leave here today worried about what's going on in our lives. Let's have a renewed sense of confidence, not in ourselves, but in the Lord. Let's have confidence that God knows what he's doing. He rules over all things, and through us, he wants to achieve his purposes.